Good morning, everyone. So, to wrap up yesterday's sessions, I think the key, it's clear that collaboration is key to deliver an innovative, safe, and effective medical device to our patients across Africa. Today, we are pleased to welcome Dr. Christopher Odero, who will in his presentation, he will walk us through issues and share ideas on how to tackle authority in action, strengthening medical device oversight across the African continent. Please, let's welcome Dr. Christopher. Dr. Christopher works as a Pan-Africa regulatory policy and intelligence partner at Roche Diagnostic in Africa. He also serves and leads various industry associations representing both local and multinational companies. In Kenya, he is the executive secretary of NAFDAC, and as well as the director and honorary treasurer at CAPI. Dr. Odero is also a member of the Africa Working Group in several regional and global industry associations, including MECOMAD, MedTech Europe, and GMTA. Let's take most of views of today's discussions.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for having me in today's session. I feel like this is almost a summary of what we had discussed yesterday. So in brief, I'll talk about regulatory authority in action, and I'll be giving insights or perspectives from an industry side. So when we look at regulations in action, I think I first of all wanted to start off by defining it from what I understand. And mainly it's the exercise of regulatory authorities' mandate to assure safe, effective, and efficacious health products and technologies from a strategic, proactive, and an efficient perspective. And this serves as both a guardian of public health and an enabler of market access for quality-assured technologies. And there are several ways in which the authority can demonstrate this, mainly by implementing strategic reliance. And I don't want to talk or define reliance. Again, we've talked about it over and over in this conference. The other one is through harmonized enforcement by implementing or enforcing globally and continentally harmonized standards and guidelines. And here we are looking at both the IMDRF and AMDF guidelines. And this should be implemented consistently as well as predictably. And then there's also proactive vigilance, where the authority is able to shift focus to robust, continuous, and mandatory post-market surveillance throughout the device life cycle, and finally through implementation of good regulatory practices. And again, here there's several elements that we can look at, but mainly through operating transparently and proportionately, by ensuring that the regulatory powers lead to efficient science-based decisions. So you may ask yourself, why must we then act now? We must act now because the reality is that we're in a situation where we have different and fragmented and unharmonized systems across the continent. And we then end up creating what we refer to as a medical device lag. And this hinders both public health and market efficiencies. Across the continent, we know that we have fragmented foundations. And many countries here are lacking dedicated specific legal frameworks. I think Laban spent a bit of time in trying to explain this yesterday. I won't get into details of that. But this then often, and sometimes also often relying on outdated drug laws. And Simone touched about this again in our talk yesterday. An example is that sometimes we have oversight that is reactive and maybe limited only to basic products. And this ends up exposing patients to substandard and falsified devices. Another thing is that we have a capacity gap, largely, again, within the regulatory authorities. Most of them are focused on having people based on scientific, pharmaceutical science, knowledge, and backgrounds. We do not really have biomedical engineers and other IVD experts as part of these teams to review and provide oversight for technical and sophisticated reviews, including our quality management system audits. And then the last one is market and predictability. And for a manufacturer, when we have non-harmonized unique national requirements, then this often means that we have to keep on repeating our efforts from one country to another. We have long approval timelines. We have unpredictable costs because every time we do this, we get timelines extended out. We have to repeat processes from one country to another. We add this onto the cost of our products. And then it means that eventually these products will be costed out of reach of people who need them most. And this will again deter investment in high quality medical technology. So eventually, I think as we look at authority in action, we have a shared goal. And for us, we need to have a system that is predictable, efficient, science-based, so that we can ensure that we have safe, quality, and high-performing products within our markets. So I have here what I suggested as a blueprint for shared progress. How do we move from this into having a system that works from both a regulatory perspective and an industry perspective? So our strategic solution is to move from the 55 distinct authorities, each country here having their own regulatory authority that we have to subject ourselves to from the industry, and move towards a unified reliance-based framework. So in order to do this, we have to have continental leadership, at least for Africa. We've seen a lot of work being done by the AMDF, now the MDA, TC, and also the Diagnostics Advisory Committee, just in terms of providing leadership and guidance to move the continent forward from a medical device and diagnostics perspective. But also we need to ensure that we are adopting the guidelines from both IMDRF, AMDF. These guidelines are based on the WHO Global Model Regulatory Framework, and they help us in terms of having unified classifications, registrations, and processes for QMS inspection. And the benefits we'll have as an industry is that we'll have manufacturers being able to submit one harmonized dossier in one country, and we hope that that can be used through these processes of reliance and others to be able to provide authorization for a product in other countries in a less difficult or a less challenging manner. The other way is through smart regulations, and here mainly we've talked about reliance. Implementing good reliance practices are very important here, because we know that they are the hallmark of a modern, efficient regulator. So if regulatory authorities are able to find ways in which they can implement reliance in ways that works for us in the continent, I think that will be a plus and a major achievement. We must stop doing work that others have done competently, because sometimes it's just repeating the same processes, and we have scarcity of resources and everything else. The other thing is formally, we should strategically recognize the marketing authorization and the QMS audit reports from others as well. We have MDSAP. I think Rana mentioned yesterday that there'll be a whole session on MDSAP that she'll be talking about. So we should deploy this in terms of the way we regulate and we support regulatory activities or processes in the continent to ensure that we are efficient with the resources we have. And the impact of that is that where we have regulatory authorities, with scarce resources and processes that are maybe difficult to implement because of the resources that are at hand, then they'll still be able to provide good and adequate oversight if they implement these reliance mechanisms that we are sharing. So again, in terms of implementing the advanced regulatory practices, authority here might be or may be demonstrated through adherence to global standards and good regulatory practices. And again, here looking at from a good regulatory practices perspective, ensuring that the rules are clear, consistent, and proportionate. We need to have commitment to transparency, where we have authorities publishing registers of all regulations and also having service charters, because oftentimes we have, you know, the regulations are published and everything, but we don't know, we are unable to tell from an industry perspective how long it will take before you get approvals or communication back from the authorities. So being committed and transparent in this process is a very clear way of demonstrating authority from the regulatory perspective. And then finally, commitment to proportionality, where requirements that are being put in place must also match the risk classification of these products. Again, we must also resist the temptation to always call for and require in-country-specific clinical trial data for devices that have already been evaluated and have received approvals from other stringent regulators, especially when we look at low-risk IVDs. And then from a global benchmarking, where we include the medical devices, we need to provide a clear objective roadmap. And this is a very strong and a good signal to the industry that the regulators are committed to achieving higher GBT maturity levels. We're seeing a lot of regulators on the continent moving towards maturity level 3 and above. So it's almost like there's a competition. But it's a good thing and a good signal to industry that there's a lot of commitment on the continent for regulators to achieve higher standards. And again, for investors, it's a good way because it's able to offer predictable and safe. It's able to signal the industry that the regulators are practicing in a predictable way, and the products that are coming in or are regulated in the continent are safe. And then it boosts confidence in terms of attracting high quality technology and investments also in the continent. Here I'd listed some of the core elements of good regulatory practices. I think we've talked about this consistently in the last the last years of this conference. Last year we spent a bit of time talking about elements of good regulatory practices. I just listed them here again so that we can refresh ourselves. But transparency and public engagement is key. As regulatory authorities, we must ensure that our practices are transparent and we are getting a lot of feedback and engaging the stakeholders so that whatever products are coming through, whatever guidelines and proposals we are making through, have the buy-in from industry in terms of implementation. This range from fees, the processes, and also publicly making all this accessible to the stakeholders, and involving them in consultations before finalization and ensuring clarity and predictability. The other thing about good regulatory practices regards risk-based proportionality, where the regulatory requirements being called for must match the risk or the product risk, the way it's been classified by the manufacturer. Again, strategic reliance, I've talked about it. Scientific consistency, where we must have sound science and adherence to globally recognized standards and practices, and also defined performance metrics. I think a lot of us struggle a lot in this field where we are trying to commit ourselves and publish clear service standards and timelines for reviewing, for licensing, inspections, and demonstrating administrative efficiencies. So in terms of the way forward and the future outlook, I'm also happy that a bit of these discussions came out yesterday. So for me, this feels like a recap. We talked about our regulations must be able to look ahead and be able to accommodate the unique challenges that our continent are facing or might be facing in the near future. We talked about artificial intelligence and softwares, and we must be able to use these technologies on the continent. So from a regulator perspective, we know that regulations must be technology neutral and focus on the post-market algorithm performance and cybersecurity, rather than putting a lot of emphasis and effort on static and slow pre-market reviews. Again, from local suitability, it's essential that for both imported and locally manufactured or produced devices, the essential principles of safety and performance must be taken into consideration, and devices must be able to be validated to handle in our settings considerations such as extreme temperatures, humidity, and unstable power that most of our countries go through or suffer from. And these are a critical national requirement that reliance alone will not be able to address. This is where we think that authorities should be able to focus a lot of effort on and make call out this so that they are well aligned and regulated. And then finally, in terms of empowering local manufacturing, the use or adoption or implementation of ISO 13485 standards should be used as a common QMS yardstick on the continent to nurture local manufacturers, as well as position them for both local needs, as well as be able to export products outside of the continent. So as I come to the end of this, I know that our success will depend largely on moving forward, and not as 54 independent regulatory authorities, but also and industry here, but as a cohesive African regulatory space, we must move together. We cannot afford to individually make steps that exclude others. So for the regulators, we must adopt and implement the guidelines from international best practices, from IMDRF and AMDF frameworks, and also commit to GBT. And from the industry, we must commit to high-quality, harmonized submissions and a robust, locally aware post-marketing surveillance systems. Let the authority in action of our NRS be the force that creates the efficiency, the quality, and the predictability necessary for shared progress in the healthcare access across the continent. I'll finish by this common African proverb, where I'm calling that, let us build a unified African regulatory space together. If we want to go fast, we go alone. But if we want to go far, then we must move together. In the medical device regulations, we must go together to ensure that we go further for our patients. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher, for the wonderful presentation. As Dr. Christopher mentioned in his presentation, the blueprint for shared progress is harmonization and reliance. In her next presentation, Dr. Noha will guide us through the next steps in the journey, offering a practical roadmap for achieving harmonization across regulatory systems. Dr. Noha is a strategic business consultant and industry expert with more than 22 years in regulatory field. She was the general manager of the General Administration of Medical Devices Registration in the EDA from 2020 till 2025, where she helped in setting a lot of regulations and guidelines for medical devices registrations, and she participated as a member in the IMDRF working group. During her journey in the EDA, she was responsible for the localization project of medical devices, equipments, and IVDs, where she helped in the establishment of so many new factories and where she had a great effect on supporting the industry. Let's welcome Dr. Noha.
Good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to be with you again today for my second session during this summit. In this session, we are going to talk about the reliance and harmonization and how effective is this topic that we have to adopt during the near future, because harmonization and reliance is not only an idea, but it's the main things that will proceed for having the medical device secured and in a very easily and short manner in all the African markets. So first, we have to talk about the current challenges in Africa's healthcare. First is a high import dependence. Our problem in African countries is that more than 80% of the African countries is dependent on importation. And this is a very great problem because it's affected by many factors like the fluctuation of the currency or any shutdown, lockdown like what happened during the COVID. So these factors can affect the availability of the medical devices in our markets. Second one is the regulatory confusion. Having so many different regulatory frameworks or regulatory guidelines among the African countries can really affect the availability of the medical device in our country and make confusion for the manufacturers to be aligned with this different regulation, and thus will lead, of course, for the insufficiency of the medical device and its availability in the market. Sorry, the screen here is not working, so please check this. Second one is the lengthy approval. Of course, by having different types of regulation, this would make the time needed for the registration or the approval lengthy time, and it will take time for the manufacturer to be updated with every different regulation for every country. Also, the cost burden is a very important topic because every manufacturer has to pay for different regulation and pay for preparing the technical dossier needed for every country. And this, of course, is very costly and is taking a lot of time from the manufacturer. When we look, when we look about the confusion of fragmented regulation, so when we put the manufacturer under the stress of having different or fragmented regulation process, this is taking a lot of his time, and we are driving his attention not from only having the medical devices available for the patient, but we can make use of this time and effort instead in another thing like R&D or building capacity. So with the benefits of harmonization, on the contrast, it's very beneficial when we have a streamlined regulation among the African countries. We can make use of the time and cost for paid with the manufacturers to use them in building capacity, having training courses for the employee or for the regulators. So I guess this would be more beneficial for the patient and for us. We have some challenges regarding the limited review capacity. Of course, all of us, or most of us, are from a scientific background. So either we are physician, pharmacists, or faculty of science. During our period in the faculty, all of us knew or studied a curriculum regarding the pharmaceutical products, the APIs, the active ingredients, indication, contraindication. So if you ask any pharmacist about the pharmaceutical products, you will find that he have already the knowledge. But our problem for the medical devices and equipments and IVDs is that we didn't have this as a separate curriculum during our study in the faculty. So most of the African countries have limited resources in calibers, knowing how to deal with the medical devices. Training gaps also is a very important thing that we have to focus more on the capacity building, which is a very crucial step to increase the awareness and raise the healthcare sector with the training of the employees and also for the regulators. The impact of this lengthy approval, if we look about the medical devices and any other product like cosmetics or mobiles or whatever, the deficiency of the presence of this product in the market, it will not affect our health. But the issue for the medical devices, when there is shortening in these products in the market, it will affect the healthcare system, and it will affect the health of the patient. He will not be able to have the health service that we have to offer for him. The impact of high importance is, as we mentioned before, more than 80% is depending on the importation. So if we have any disaster or fluctuation, so this will decrease the amount or the availability of the product in the market, and thus we will not be able to offer our medical service as needed. So the impact of duplication of resources will be, will not have a lot of time for the regulators and for the manufacturers to review all these documents and to submit all these documents for different countries, and it's very costly and will consume a lot of our time. On the other hand, if we have a streamlined process among African countries, this of course will make us and make the manufacturer able to reuse and best use of his resources, either for the employees or for the financial resources, to direct these resources instead of redoing the same work again and reinvent the wheel and review the same documents that have been already reviewed by other authority. So we can use these resources, for example, for capacity building or for R&D. If we have to look about the harmonization for patient, every time we talk about the importance of harmonization from the perspective of the regulators or from the perspective of the manufacturers, but to have the point of view of the patient. What do you think if you are a patient and you cannot find your medical device? Of course, it will be a very big problem that you are suffering from illness and you cannot find this medical device. So harmonization, of course, will affect the patient by the availability of the product. And having these medical devices will definitely increase the health service that we offer for the patient. Regarding the trust in the healthcare system, we have a big problem here. And if we ask, let me ask some of the Egyptian applicants or distributors. Of course, when you are having a shipment and already it has been shipped from abroad, and when your shipment arrives at the customs, have you ever met a case that you have a difference between what is approved and what has been shipped? Of course. So the action, can you take your product directly to the market at this stage? You are stuck and you have to go to AUDA and check with the variation department, for example, and the variation department or the regulators in the EDA have to check if this product is the same product. We have to contact the other authority or the notified body, for example, and to check if it's the same product that is regulated in the other market. So this is a kind of reliance that we make without concentrating that this is the concept of reliance. But this is from our perspective as regulators. Let me tell you something about the patient perspective. My dad 2 weeks ago had to undergo a surgery, cataract surgery, and his physician asked him, by the way, my dad is a policeman, he's away from the field of physicians, and his doctor asked him about the type of the IOL that he would like. He didn't even mention the brand, but he only mentioned the country of origin. He told him, I have IOLs from America, from India, and he listed some countries. So my dad goes for, no, I want the American. This is what we called in Arabic, عقدة الخواجة, that the patient feels safe when he is using the same product that is already being used for the customers or for the patients in other countries that he rely on them. So in our mindset, we are already adopting the idea of reliance without knowing, for the patient does not know that this is reliance. On enhancing the idea of reliance and harmonization in the government and regulator, of course, this would greatly affect the time for review and the burden that faces the regulators for the heavy workload on them for reviewing every single document. In Egypt, we have some collaboration with some African countries. We signed a lot of MOUs in order to facilitate and streamline the transfer of our product from one country to another. So, for example, we signed an MOU with South Africa in cooperation with pharmaceutical and medical devices. Zambia, we are focusing on sharing regulatory expertise to improve the assessment of medical devices and IVDs. In Senegal, we are aiming to unify standards and procedures for the regulation of medical devices across the region. For Ghana, Nigeria, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe, we established a multilateral MOUs among Egypt and these countries in order to collaborate in the field of medical devices and IVDs. What are the key components for the roadmap of harmonization? As my colleague, Dr. Christopher mentioned, we have to think more about having a continental regulatory framework to be aligned between all the African countries and to have the same documents or closed documents in order to avoid the duplication of work again. Also to have some regional centers of excellence to exchange expertise and leverage the building capacity of our employees. And as we talked yesterday about the importance of having electronic submission, this would greatly affect the access of each government to check the documents and the approval from other authority. Fostering public-private partnership is very important also for having the idea of reliance and harmonization on land. And being aligned to international standards like ISO and WHO prerequisites is a very important topic to set them as a benchmark that the African countries have to move forward and be aligned with this regulation. On establishing a unified regulatory framework, this of course will help us a lot to reduce the time used for review, reduce the effort paid for having our products in the market, and reduce the cost that the manufacturer have to pay for registration or approvals for his product. And thus we will have our product available in the market, and thus we will reach a better health service for our patient. For having a regional centers of experience, this is very important for our building capacity, and I do believe that every job, it doesn't matter where it's a very huge or low one, but it's mainly dependent on the human resources, so we have to focus more on exchanging experience between countries. And fostering collaboration and innovation between stockholders and regulators will also benefit a lot. And having a public-private partnership will enhance collaboration among African countries and also among regulators and manufacturers. And it will optimize the resources. So if I have a pharmacist or an employee, instead of redoing the work and reinventing the wheel, I can make use of this resource or this employee instead of reviewing the documents, so I can reuse him again in anything like post-marketing or R&D. So I guess this would be beneficial for all of us. The unified approach will streamline, of course, the approval, which in almost, at least in Egypt, it takes more than 2 or 3 years. So I guess adopting the idea of reliance will effectively decrease this time for approvals, and also it will reduce the cost, and as I mentioned before, to reuse it the cost in something different. And it will, of course, affect the healthcare outcome for our community. Call for unified action. To wrap up what we said, please, we have to adopt this idea of reliance and harmonization among countries. And my quote for last is: the future begins today. Together, stockholders, regulators, manufacturers, we have together, let's build the health self-sufficiency in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Noha. We are all hoping for continental regulatory framework. So now we are pleased to welcome Dr. Leratu Moti, who will share with us the updates on the emergency use continental listing procedure for IVDs by AMRH. Dr. Leratu Moti is a program officer facilitating the work stream on medical device regulation and the network of African Reliance Laboratory at the African Union Development Agency, working under the African Medicine Regulatory Harmonization Program within the Health Continental Industrial Development Directorate based in Midrand, South Africa. Dr. Moti holds a master's degree in chemistry and a PhD in pharmaceutical science and brings over 11 years of experience in pharmaceutical research, product evaluation, and regulatory affairs. Her career began in industry as a research and development scientist at a pharmaceutical manufacturing company, followed by over 8 years as a dossier evaluation assessor at the SAPRA. She later served as dossier evaluation coordinator under the AMRH program, contributing to regional harmonization and capacity building efforts. Dr. Moti is deeply committed to strengthening regulatory systems across Africa with a particular focus on advancing medical devices and in vitro diagnostic regulation in her current role at NEPAD. She supports continental policy and technical frameworks aimed at improving access to quality-assured health technologies. Please, let's welcome Dr. Leratu.
Thank you very much for the welcome. I will be providing updates on the emergency use continental listing procedure that has been underway under AMRH, the African Medicine Regulatory Harmonization Program. So this work has been occurring since around last year, 2024, when we had a public emergency for the Mpox emergency. So just to provide a brief background, I will provide objectives of the Medical Device Assessment Committee. And I see a need to mention this because they have been the AMDF committee was reorganized, and there was the Medical Device Technical Committee, which was formed last year in 2024 in order to provide a technical committee that will provide scientific evaluation of medical device and in vitro diagnostics at continental level. And the Medical Device Assessment Technical Committee also facilitates the harmonization of requirements and standards for assessments and registration and market authorization activities at regional economic community level and NRA level. So this technical committee was therefore critical in the the emergency that formed for the Mpox, and they became the committee that then facilitated the registration or the listing, continental listing of the Mpox applications that were received. Just to give the work that they provide, they had to then develop documents, technical requirements, and guidelines that support medical device regulation activities at continental level and regional level. They then are responsibility, or part of their scope would be selecting and endorsing experts to support continental work and to lead the development of continental regulatory procedures, and that is the listing procedure that is underway. They are also responsible in adopting the TOC, which is the format that is used for assessments of medical device and IVDs, convening of joint regulatory meetings, especially for priority medical devices, including IVDs. They also support the harmonization and alignment of guidelines and procedures to be used for joint assessment done at reg level and continental level. They also support the advocacy for the use of reliance level, including the WHO CRP. This also then includes the linkages between them and the AMDF as well as NRAs. So Medical Device Technical Committee will then be the committee that conducts the continental assessment inspections and therefore issues a recommendation of listing of the priority IVDs and medical device. The MDATC will then, through the Secretariat, inform the forum, which is AMDF, and the concerned countries electronically of the listed products that would then be tabled, would have been tabled before the steering committee. And once those products are listed, and these listed products would be published and available to the public, then they are then shared with NRAs for them to be informed of the outcomes. Then there is a review by the NRAs. Once the products are listed, the NRAs have the responsibility to then register the applications within the 90-day period that is allocated. And concerned IRNA are then are required to provide feedback periodically, which is within 30 days, to the AMRH or AMA in terms of the status of the applications to monitor the registration period. As mentioned, then with the emergency use listing of Mpox, it was declared last year, and therefore work had to be done in order to have these applications assessed and listed. So rapid assessments were conducted for dossiers, and diagnostic advisory committee was also used or collaborated with AMRH in order to assess the lab performance of these applications or verify lab performance for these. And where applicable, QMS audits are also executed. There were templates that were generated for this process, and checklists, assessment reports that are Mpox specific, as well as a QMS audit check that was done. Then a decision timelines were also set for these applications, and listed product then is supported at country level for emergency use or authorization. In terms of the process that occurred, the expression of interest was issued, and applicants then expressed their interest. Then the MDATC facilitated a collaborative review using the 16 affected countries together with the Africa CDC Diagnostic Advisory Committee. So they utilized a work sharing model for the assessment of these applications. The outcomes were then so the assessments were concluded and the outcomes were published once they were endorsed by the AMRH steering committee. These applications are then classified as the listed applications for emergency use listing currently. Then the expression of interest was received for the 8 applications. And out of the 8 applications, 3 have already been continentally listed using this approach. And once continentally listed, the NRAs can then utilize reliance in order to ensure ownerships of the NRA, and full reports are shared with NRAs in order to ensure that they can utilize the reliance procedure, which is a more reduced form of registration as opposed to conducting the full assessment. In terms of the status, then we have, as shown, the applications, the status of all the applications. There is one that is currently under QA and one that is currently under first assessment response, and 3 have been withdrawn, and we have then 3 that have been continentally listed at the moment. So the reason for withdrawal, we have of the 3 products, 2 are locally manufactured, and one of the reasons was that the applications did not pass the clinical verification or performance, clinical performance aspect, and therefore they have now been are assisted by Africa CDC in obtaining the panels in order to conduct the clinical performance, as this was the reason they provided for not attaining the required clinical performance limit. So this will need a redesigning of the kit, and they are then eligible to resubmit once it is ready. Then in terms of continental templates and guidelines, these are the templates and guidelines that were generated in this process, and they are outlined in the slide. There is guidance for assessments based on the IMDRF. There is the emergency use listing guidance document. There are templates that then are used in the full process for continental listing. And the benefit to this is these products can also be utilized for the routine continental process, which is not the emergency use listing. So in the design of the applications, in the design of the process and templates and SOPs, the MDATC also considered the use of the routine process, which is not the emergency use listing. In the routine process, there would then be specific templates utilized, and those were then factored in the planning. And in terms of then the status of the applications, this would be the status of the countries that recommended the applications that are listed, the 3 that are listed under EUL. So for the first applications, only 3 countries of interest were included, and these applications also approved the applications within the 34 calendar days or 24 working days. And for the second application, only 1 country had applied, and that country has also approved within 60 calendar days or 44 working days. Then for the third applications, there hasn't been applications applied for yet, since it was only listed on the 20th of October. Then these are some of the lessons that have been learned from the MPOX pilot. And so guidelines that have been developed, SOPs, templates that have been tested and refined through the collaborative sessions will now be refined and can be utilized for the routine continental process. Some applicants had requested extension, so the time provided will be modified. Assessment timelines are achievable with dedicated expert pool, so that has been verified from the MPOX assessment that were conducted. Adoption of continental EUL is highly positive by NRA, so that was also positive feedback provided. In terms of the next steps, this will be applications will be finalized and we will publish a standard for emergency use listing guidelines. Assessors will be trained, continental assessors. There was already an expression of interest for a pool of assessors and auditors. So once that pool has been concluded, then we will ensure there's capacity building of these assessors and auditors within the continent, so that we establish a very strong and experienced pool of assessors and trainers who will then be our assessors and auditors for the continental procedure. Promotion of adoption at national level via the AMDF forum. So that, as shown from the previous slide, is working well with the applications, with the countries that have received the applications and the timelines that they are meeting.
Okay, so for these sessions, we're gonna have a little bit of audience engagement. So the first question will be directed to the audience. It will appear now. Yeah, so as audience, do you think that medical devices regulation clearly differentiated pharmaceutical regulation across global regulatory framework? Please raise your hands if you think yes, they are differentiated. They're totally differentiated. Okay. And partially, who think it's partially? Okay, the majority. Okay, so who thinks it's no, there is a big confusion between both? Okay, so the majority thinks that it's partially, some regions differentiate well and others don't. So now we will hear from Dr. Khadijah. So we know that Nigeria is seen as a trailblazer in regulatory implementation across Africa, especially through NAFDAC's work. When it comes to medical devices, how does NAFDAC distinguish its regulatory approach from that of pharmaceuticals? Are there any frameworks or considerations that guide this differentiation?
Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's good to be back here again today. In terms of differentiation of the regulatory tools or the regulation of medical devices, we have been regulating medical devices from inception of the agency. But the framework for pharmaceuticals matured faster for several reasons. But again, as we all know, the regulatory sector is very dynamic, and we also tried to move, with the happenings in the sector. And over time, we had been using our available systems to regulate medical devices, and that meant relying a bit more on the pharmaceutical framework. But as we moved ahead in trying to align with best practices, participation in different fora, and all of that, we began to see that there was much more to medical device regulation, different from pharmaceuticals. And this came more to the fore when we had our WHO GBT plus medical devices assessment. In fact, it was it was as bad as having to take a look again at our Establishment Act, as in the act of law that established NAFDAC, giving NAFDAC the mandate to regulate medical devices. Because that was a 1993 document, and it hadn't been reviewed, over time. And so something as fundamental as the definition of medical devices was not properly captured in the new context in that document. So right now we're going through a review of our Establishment Act, because that was one of the things that came to the fore during our assessment, to properly capture what a medical device actually is, to give us the legal backing to be able to regulate it. And of course, becoming an affiliate member of IMDRF also obliges us to adopt or adapt the guidelines and standards, to be able to properly regulate medical devices, especially in line with the global model regulatory framework. So that has it has also opened our eyes to so many other things that we were not doing before. Things like field safety notices, field safety corrective actions. So all of those new things have helped us to review our regulations, review our acts, develop new guidelines, adopt standards, So it's that gives the differentiation between the pharmaceutical regulation and medical devices. So these are things that are coming up for us, and that's one of the take-homes for us from the WHO GBT plus medical devices assessment. It is really, really helping us to develop the regulatory tools to effectively regulate medical devices. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Khadijah. Yeah, I think guidelines for medical devices are essential. So from industry point of view, when there is a guideline issued by an authority, it either makes us very excited or it worries us. So again, to the audience, in your opinion, how do you how do regulatory guidelines contribute to growth, innovation, and compliance of the medical device industry? Please raise your hand if you think that guidelines are highly effective. Okay, these are very few. Okay, somewhat effective. Okay. And moderately effective? Yeah, okay. So now to Dr. Rachel. So with the NDA actively implementing medical device regulations since 2020, supported by newly developed guidelines and issued circulars, and with the February 2026 compliant deadline approaching, what support mechanisms are currently in place to assist stakeholders during this transition? Additionally, what major regulatory challenges have the NDA identified, and how are these being addressed to ensure smooth and effective implementation?
Thank you very much. Morning, everyone. It's good to be back. Yeah. So maybe I can just start by mentioning again that the NDA issued a circular almost 2 years ago stating that there would be mandatory registration of medical devices, but starting with surgical instruments and appliances, because that's the scope of the current law that is being, of course, addressed and being changed in a few months. So to support our clients, we did issue that circular 2 years ago. The clients have been coming in to inquire, and so they're dedicated people to respond to any queries they may have. Because I think they thought it was immediate for some reason, and so they were scrambling to submit hastily made dossiers. The assessment team has been very supportive in communicating back in record time on what is necessary for a good dossier so that they do not fail. So they've been getting support in that area. Additionally, we do have various engagements as an authority in different fora, and we make it a point to talk about this deadline that is coming up. And the NDA will be issuing a reminder circular before this year ends. The challenges is that despite all the awareness we have tried to create around it, some people are still unaware. It's like they're just finding out about this deadline. But yeah, they have to do what they have to do, as well as that limited scope in the law. We've had clients come in to submit dossiers for other ranges of medical devices. And so we put a voluntary provision, like it's a voluntary submission of dossiers, and we have received quite a number. So as far as I know, we have approximately about 50 submissions since that came in. And yeah, we have the capacity now, maybe not entirely, but we are almost there. And so we are ready to deal with that as an authority, because these devices need to be registered. The public needs to have confidence in the devices that we have on the market, and we needed to start at some point. So thank you very much for that question.
Thank you, Dr. Rachel, for all the work and that the NRA has done, and all the collaboration with all the stakeholders. So, jumping to the next question, who do you think, which stakeholders, back to the audience, which stakeholders do you believe should be involved, in shaping the regulatory framework? Government regulatory authorities, industry representative, healthcare professionals, academic research institution, patient advocacy group, international regulatory bodies, or you think all the above, or maybe you pick one or two. So we will begin with the choices from the audience. Who do you think should, or 7, let's say for all the above, who agrees that all the above should contribute in the regulatory framework? Yeah, the majority. So we're going to the SAPRA, who had a very interesting experience. SAPRA recently launched a voluntary feasibility study for medical devices registration. So, Mr. Khanyisile, from your perspective, what key insights or early learnings have emerged from this initiative? How do you envision it influencing the future of regulatory pathway for medical device and IVDs in South Africa, and potentially shaping harmonization efforts across the continent?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the question. I think our industry, I see Khadijah and Simone and Robin can agree that it was a pivotal moment when we started the feasibility. Industry has been awaiting to see when exactly and the readiness from the regulator in terms of establishing a process for registration. And within this feasibility, there were some key insights that we saw. One being industry readiness, another being establishing proper processes. So within internally, in terms of digitally, how can we have a digital system that can support not only the regulator, but also industry? And also setting in terms of timelines, in terms of the framework. And just to say that it becomes quite a catalyst, because from then we're able to also ascertain in terms of local manufacturers, the support that they actually need. I think that was something that was missing from the regulator side, and it's something that we actually saw that they really, really need the support. And so just in short, in terms of timeframes, as we conclude this feasibility study, the main thing is to also publish the findings of the feasibility study, to also engage with our industry so we can all work together to see how we can better the process when we do the call-up. And then medium term is also then to set up timelines for registration, transitional plan, have proper fees that have also been commented to from our industry as the revised regulations come into play. And also ensuring that we do have the capacity, because that's also quite important, and have a phased approach in terms of call-up for registration. And then for long-term is to strengthen our post-marketing surveillance, which is something that is quite critical, and also something from the feasibility that we're seeing that there's a lot of products that are already in the market, and from the applicant side, how do they then ensure that for post-marketing surveillance, they do follow the requirements as required by the regulator. So for long-term is to strengthen that and work with our industry. And as I said, local manufacturers, again, the support. So long-term, ensuring that we do support local manufacturers in terms of the regulatory support that they need.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Khanyisile. I think it's very interesting when we collaborate together with the industry and the authority to deliver an effective and safe medical device to our patients. So to sum it up, I guess for our panelists, we need the regulations, we need guidelines, but we need them to be well differentiated from pharmaceuticals, and we need all stakeholders to participate in shaping the regulation. So thank you, our panelists. Thank you all.